Welcome back, and starting our first segment of Breakfast Show with the press review, and we are joined in the studio by Mr. Mohamed, Sheta, media expert. Good morning, sir, and welcome to Breakfast.
A very good morning to you and to all your viewers. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to start with the main headline in Al Ahram newspaper, where read President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi received on Tuesday Spanish defense minister to discuss boosting cooperation in the fight against terrorism. The Sisi and Spanish ministers discussed the current Middle East crisis and the necessity to formulate a clear plan to resolve it, while stressing the need for cooperation with Western countries in the fight against terrorism. We have a new visit with a new Spanish figure coming to Egypt, Minister of Defense. How do you see such a visit and its importance?
As a matter of fact, this is indeed just another visit in the long line of visits during the past couple of weeks, and especially also the visits from the Spanish sides were quite frequent during the past couple of months. And I think it's a very important visit, especially that they are discussing a very crucial topic for not only for our region in Egypt, but also for the European countries right now, which is combating terrorism, which was until very recent was only seen as a Middle Eastern problem. As in the report also, which is in front of me, the spokesperson, Ambassador Ala Youssef, said that this strategic plan for the fight against terrorism should not feature solely military action, but also should take into consideration the economic and social dimension that have allowed for the spread of militancy in the area. I think this is a very important role. If you don't solve the problem from its roots, which means the economic and the political situations in many of the Middle Eastern countries, or the other countries like Afghanistan, for example, or Pakistan, I think we will not be able to fight and combat terrorism in a very efficient way. And I think this is a very important point, which all the different countries need to focus on during the next phase.
Okay, moving to Al-Akhbar Al-Yawm newspaper, where read President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi called his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin on Tuesday to congratulate him on the 71st anniversary of Russia's Victory Day and to discuss the latest developments in Syria and Libya. The president stressed the importance of the Russian and American efforts to reach an agreement on achieving a peaceful solution to the war in Syria, and we have more details on the following report.
Counterpart Vladimir Putin on Tuesday to congratulate him for the 71st anniversary of Russia's Victory Day and to discuss the latest developments in Syria and Libya. President al-Sisi stressed the importance of Russian and American efforts to reach an agreement on achieving a peaceful solution to the war in Syria. Egypt has repeatedly stressed that a political solution between warring parties is the only way to end the current Syrian crisis. The two presidents have also discussed the situation in Libya, with Sisi stressing the importance of supporting the Libyan government and its army. The presidents touched on ways to enhance the cooperation between the two countries and the continuation of efforts to restore Russian flights to Egypt. Flights between Russia and Egypt have been suspended since the crash of a Russian airliner shortly after takeoff from Sharm el-Sheikh that resulted in the death of all passengers, 224 on board. Russia deemed the crash a result of terrorism, while Egypt is still investigating the incident.
And still with Mr. Mohamed Sheta commenting on the news, the conversation between President Sisi and President Vladimir Putin, and still we did not resume the flights between Egypt and Russia until this moment. How do you see? So of course, we have strong relations with Russia, but why did they not return the flights back to Egypt?
Well, this is a good question. First of all, also from my side, congratulations to the Russian people for the 71st anniversary. The fact that they are still discussing using the flights is indeed a good sign that they're at least discussions on the highest levels between both countries. Today or yesterday, Germany announced that they have lifted the ban on the luggage accompanying passengers traveling from and to Sharm el-Sheikh. So I think all the European countries, including Russia, are starting to resume their operations and the flight operations between Sharm el-Sheikh and the other cities in Europe. Well, I think probably it's also something related to the security and the safety of the Russian people. Of course, the Russian president does not want to do something ahead of time and risking any potential hazard for its people. Because let's say, for example, they would have resumed flights very early, for example, and another incident would have happened, not necessarily a plane crash or anything, but just a minor incident, then
he
probably...
doesn't want to take the risk.
He doesn't want to take the risk because the Russian people and the Russian media would probably have criticized him heavily. So they're taking it step by step, which is definitely also for the sake and for the benefit of the Egyptian tourism sector as well.
Okay, moving to Al Masri Al Yom newspaper, where Prime Minister Sharif Ismail delivered a statement before Parliament on Tuesday, arguing for the extension of the state of emergency in North Sinai for 3 months, accusing external and internal forces of supplying terrorist groups with money, arms, ammunition, individual and political and media cover. Ismail said the extension of the state of emergency would help the army have a favorable environment for ridding the government of terrorist elements and enforcing the law. And we have more in the following report.
Prime Minister Sharif Ismail delivered a statement to Parliament on Tuesday, arguing for the extension of a state of emergency in North Sinai for 3 months, accusing external and internal forces of supplying terrorist groups with money, arms, ammunition, individuals and political and media cover. Prime Minister Ismail said that the terrorist groups are still targeting North Sinai and are still causing havoc in terms of smuggling arms, spreading extremism, and killing army personnel, police forces and civilians, with the objective of turning the entire Sinai Peninsula into a lawless area and a springboard for spreading terrorism in the entire region. Ismail added that the extension of the state of emergency would help the army have a favorable environment for ridding the governorate of terrorist elements and enforcing the law. Ismail said that North Sinai needs comprehensive development in addition to high security measures to be completely free from terrorism. Ismail also said that the new 3 months extension of the state of emergency in North Sinai reflects the state's iron will be impose security on every inch of Egypt, adding that a lot of our army and security forces have sacrificed their souls in North Sinai while standing up to the black terror and extremist thinking there. Ismail argued that in fighting terrorism in North Sinai, army and security forces have always been keen to make sure that it doesn't come at the expense of public rights.
Welcome back. And Mr. Mohamed Sheta, what's your opinion about extending the emergency in Sinai until this moment? It has been for a long while, of course, but until this moment they are extending the emergency. Do you believe it will help?
Well, it's definitely not going to harm. So taking into consideration all the terrorist attacks we have in the region around us, not only in Egypt, but also in the nearby countries, probably the security sources here in Egypt, they probably have a much better insight into the situation. And I'm sure that they would not have extended this state of emergency if not necessary. We are still facing lots of attacks. We just had recently here in Helwan an incident where I think 7 or 8 policemen were killed while they were in a mission in a microbus. So I think there are lots of terrorist activities still going on in the region, in the country, and definitely extending the state of emergency in Sinai, I think, will kind of limit their activities, not only on the Sinai, but also in the expanding their activities to the other important cities like Cairo.
But still, they are so active in Sinai. They are making their attacks frequently, and as if they know the place they know the area very well, and whenever they want to attack, they attack and return back.
Well, probably during the past 5 years, there was kind of a lack of security in that area on the Sinai. In many parts of the Sinai, at least, and I think they pretty much know the locations, and probably they have been living there for quite some time. And I don't know if they have help from any sources from outside Egypt or from Rafah or wherever. You know, I mean, I'm not such a military expert. I'm not into that into so many details of this issue. But nevertheless, I think. Extending the state of emergency is will be quite helpful for the next phase. And like I said, of course, the Parliament has to agree to it as well. But I'm sure that the Parliament will not disagree to this decision taken by the government.
Okay, and moving back to Al-Akhbar Al-Yom newspaper, where 10 Egyptian fishermen have arrived at Cairo airport from Tunisia. Tunisian authorities released 14 Egyptian fishermen who had been held in Tunisia for 2 weeks over illegal fishing in Tunisia territorial waters. The Tunisian authorities arrested the fishermen and confiscated their boat named Abu Hamida Mohamed in Tunisian territorial waters before escorting them to Sfax port. The Egyptian Foreign Ministry contacted the Tunisian authorities to request the release of the fishermen, and the other 4 fishermen will come back home after illegal procedures are over. Why we are also listening too much or witnessing too much incidents of each country arresting illegal fishing? Does the fisherman doesn't know the legal and the illegal areas, or the intent to do so?
I think they know very well where they are supposed to fish and where they're not supposed to fish, and I think this shows how reckless some of those fishermen are. They're actually using lots of resources and lots of capacities from the different Egyptian authorities, like the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for example. Many European countries, when some of their people violate the laws somewhere and they have to go bring them from wherever or free them from wherever, or pay ransom, or even have expenses, they actually, after they get their people back, they ask them to pay for the expenses. So I think the Egyptian government should do the same, and if any Egyptian fisherman or any Egyptian citizen violates any law anywhere in the world, then actually he has to cover all the expenses for such a reckless behavior.
Okay, moving to Al-Wafd newspaper, where Egypt will open the Rafah border crossing with Gaza in both directions on Wednesday and Thursday. According to a Tuesday statement, the decision comes in response to a request by Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas following a Monday meeting with the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in Cairo. The Palestinian embassy said the crossing will be opened in both directions to allow the passage of people for humanitarian reasons, as well as Palestinians who hold residency permits. The border issue between Gaza and Egypt, it's a controversial issue. It's a controversial issue because lots of people are depending on crossing this border for humanitarian cases, those who are sick or who need help, or so and so. So what's your opinion about closing the border for a long time and opening it for a limited time?
Well, of course, it's a very sad thing that this border issue has not been solved with the 3 relevant parties: the Egyptian side, the Israeli side, and the Palestinian side. I think it is really outrageous that we haven't been able to solve this Palestinian-Israeli conflict over the past decades now. And I think it's really about time that, especially the Palestinian side and the Israeli side, really start moving ahead with serious steps. And of course, we've noticed that the Israeli side has not been very cooperative during the past couple of months and years. Actually, the very recent activities when they had the Prime Minister meeting at the Golan Heights shows that they're not really very serious in solving the Middle Eastern crisis or the Middle Eastern peace process very soon.
Israelis.
Unfortunately, very bad behavior.
Moving to Al-Wafd newspaper, where Egypt will open the Rafah border. We read that.
Yeah.
We're moving to Al-Ahram newspaper, where Egypt stocks slumped Wednesday as Egyptian particular individuals who represent more than two-thirds of the market went on selling spree with assets moving to foreign and Arab investors. The market benchmark Egypt's 30 index was down 2.59% to register 7,459 points in a session, and that witnessed local investors, net sellers, to the tune of 51.3 million pounds. We don't know whether the Forex is important to our economy or not, because we always hear numbers. It's going up, it's going down, it lost, it won. So do you believe the Forex really is boosting our economy?
Well, the thing is, well, it's definitely an indicator to what's going on in the economy. The fact that lots of Egyptians were selling during the past couple of weeks and investing in real estate shows that
it's
the
not
economy,
an economic.
It's not a productive thing, you
yeah.
know. So this is one thing, but nevertheless, it shows in which direction it's going. Of course, the central bank has been doing lots of efforts in order to stabilize the value of the Egyptian pounds against the dollar. It has succeeded to a certain extent. There were lots of speculators who were actually speculating with the Egyptian pound and the dollar, of course. And many of them are actually well-known businessmen or business companies who are actually, for example, working in the trade sector or in the automotive sector, and they figured out that it's much more beneficial for them to speculate with the dollar instead of really be productive in the sector they're working in. So hopefully the Egyptian government will continue their efforts in stabilizing the Egyptian pound and attracting more foreign investors and also Egyptian investors to invest in the Egyptian stock market.
Okay, and Al-Akhbar Al-Yom newspaper, where Egyptian pound was stable at a central bank auction on Tuesday that strengthened slightly on the black market. The central bank sold $119.6 million at 8.76 per dollar, unchanged from the previous week. The pound rose, however, on the black market to 10.85 to 10.95, compared with 11.5 a week earlier, two traders said, without giving any volume figures. Still, the dollar is very vital to our economy. Unfortunately, it's whether it goes up or down, it harm our economy.
Well, actually, it harms the Egyptian consumer the most, actually, because the problem is that many of the companies working in Egypt, operating in Egypt, are actually benefiting from the current dollar, so-called dollar crisis in Egypt. I'll just give you an example. All the car companies who are complaining that they can't sell any cars because of the dollar crisis, actually all the car prices have risen up to 30–40% during the past couple of weeks.
Everything is risen up.
But the cars in a very unacceptable way, and nevertheless they're still spending millions of pounds on lavish parties, on lavish launch events, on lavish leisure trips for the employees. So there's not really a crisis, and I think it's very important for the government to take out-of-the-box decisions. For example, opening the import for used cars. I think it's very important because a new car, let's say for example a Chinese car or a Japanese car, costs now here around 300 or 400 Egyptian pounds. You can get a 5-year-old German car or a 7-year-old German car from Germany,
like the case in
for only 50,000 or 60,000 Egyptian pounds. You know, so I think it's very important that the government rethinks some of their decisions, especially regarding the import of cars. And if they open the import for used cars from Europe with a certain standards regarding safety and emissions and everything. And by the way, the used cars in Germany are much cleaner than the new cars we're importing, for example, from Japan, China, or Korea.
The West is depending. They have a market for the used cars, and it's booming.
Of course, it's booming, and it has lots of options and lots of opportunities. Because, for example, the German automotive market has around 50 million cars registered, and from those 50 million cars, there are around 40 million used cars, you know, so older than 1 year. So I think it's very important that we open this, because this will save Egypt really billions of dollars, and people will be able to drive safe cars, because they have, of course, the latest safety features according to the Euro NCAP standards, and of course they also are much cleaner, because they use Euro 4, Euro 5, and Euro 6 emission standards as well. So I think this is a very important step the government really has to take.
Mr. Mohamed, Sheta, media expert, thank you for joining us, and welcome to Breakfast.
Thank you very much for having me, and have a lovely day.
Thank you. And now we're moving to a quick break and come back, so stay tuned.